So recently I heard a term called intuitive branding. And I was like, what is that? So what do I do when I hear a topic that really interests me? I go straight to the source. So this week we have with us Sunil Godse, and we talk about intuitive branding. And it's not just about branding in terms of the look and feel. It's branding in how do you beat your competition in 14 seconds with intuition. A conversation that is fascinating. I had so many aha moments during that interview together. It was spectacular. So let's go to my interview with Sunil. Sunil, thank you so much for accepting my invitation today.
No problem. I'm looking so forward to talking about intuitive branding and how it leverages the power of intuition to create trusted relationships in under 14 seconds, which is exactly how you eliminate your competition.
That is super interesting. And that's where we go. But before we go there, could I ask you to introduce yourself for the people who don't know you yet?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm Sunil Godse, CEO of Radical Solutions Group, and I've been diving into intuition as of late. I've used intuition essentially for all my clients in figuring out what their issues are. And so starting with listening to intuition when I was 5 years old, and driving a voice driving me to raise money. At a time when my dad said, you couldn't have these video games because they're expensive. And so this voice says, Sunil, go door to door to raise money. And I raised $200. And so that's the entrepreneurial seed that started for me when I was younger. And then I've been helping businesses, both small and large, everything from startups to companies like Citibank and Western Digital to implement intuitive branding in sort of their business areas or as a whole. And yeah, that keeps me pretty busy on top of podcasts and interviewing people and talking to amazing people like you to spread the message about intuition and its importance in business.
Which is an amazing podcast. I'll make sure we put the link in the description because it is flabbergasting.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
What is intuitive branding? Because that's probably the question our audience are asking. What is that?
Yeah, so intuitive branding essentially leverages the power of intuition to create trusted relationships within the workplace. And when you look at the actual science of intuition, so if you pick up my book, Gut, there's a lot of MRIs in there and a lot of the science behind intuition. But one of the things that happens is intuition hits the amygdala, which is the first place you make a decision. And other studies have shown that intuition happens on average 7 to 10 seconds before you actually make a decision. And in entrepreneurs' case, on average 7 seconds before they make an actual business decision. So this is research that's already been done. And when you look at the trust element of this stuff, trust starts in as little as 33 milliseconds. And we've all been there. If you worked for someone that you didn't like, or you loved the coworkers that you were in, or you walked into a boardroom saying, something's off, that immediate reaction is your intuition saying either something is great, which is what we call positive intuitive signals, or something is not so great. And those are negative intuitive signals. And we'll talk about that in a bit. And
as entrepreneurs, we've all had this client or potential client that we're like, we meet them and we're like,
Yes, absolutely. And those are the problem clients. And sometimes we get wooed by money. We got to have a client. And what happens is you start taking the riffraff and they start taking way too much of your time, or their expectations are out of whack. And it's just not really something that you should take on. And so what intuitive branding does is it takes that 33 milliseconds is where the trust starts. But what the research also shows is by the time you exchange any type of time, effort, or money, that takes under 14 seconds. So I'm going to meet, let's say, Sara, I'm going to meet you, and it takes me 33 milliseconds to say, I trust you. And it's going to take me under 14 seconds to say, yes, I'm going to buy what you have, or I'm going to listen to you further, or you're interesting. Let me take a deeper dive into what you're doing. And that's in under 14 seconds. And when you do that in a business, what happens is you start to attract top talent. And when you attract top talent, they're highly engaged. They're a lot more productive, and the teamwork is a lot more cohesive. And then the other thing is that you also attract loyal customers who are not only deepening their customer journey with you, but they're buying more and more frequently, and they're telling others, which is free marketing. And it's 6 times less to service an existing client than it does a new client, because they're helping you with their marketing. And so when you do that, guess where these employees and customers are coming from? Your competitors. And so you squeeze the competitors out from either any revenue or productivity, and they're finished. And that happens again in under 14 seconds. So my tagline on my website, sunilgodse.com, is it takes under 14 seconds to essentially eliminate your competition. And so that's what I do by implementing intuitive branding in companies and with entrepreneurs. And I've got a couple of case studies that I could share also that show this in action, actually.
I love the 14-second, because as humans, we're often looking for proof, right? For evidence of, we all know the intuition. We all have the feelings once in a while that, oh, this is a good decision, or maybe not, but we still go, What do you see some of the mistakes entrepreneurs or businesses do when it comes to intuitive branding, when it comes to basically their intuition?
Yeah. So the very, very first thing I do with any either leadership or HR team, sales team, or marketing team, it all depends upon how they're engaging me and my team, is that I start by optimizing everybody's intuition. And so let's get into sort of the deep woods about intuition. So we all have an inventory of positive signals and negative signals. Positive signals are the ones that are telling you this is the right decision, and negative signals are the ones telling you to back away from a decision. And so, and again, with the intuition happening in the amygdala area, it's either you're going to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, which is a negative signal, or you're not, which is a positive signal. So that's how simplistic intuition works. And so what I get entrepreneurs and business owners to do is to go back in history to take a look at, okay, what were the good decisions and what were the bad decisions, map them out, and what did it feel like in those moments? And those are the inventory of signals that you have. So for me, for example, my positive signals are essentially the dots connecting or feeling a sense of flow. My negative signals, my very, very first one is I lose my peripheral vision. I just get hyper focused. My eyebrows cross like this. And it could be something I'm actually seeing or I'm thinking, and it's the wrong decision. And so that's my very, very first signal, that what I'm thinking or about what I'm seeing is wrong. I need to back away. Perhaps I need more information. But in the moment that I'm about to make that decision, I don't have everything I need to make that decision to move forward. And what fuels these signals is 4 intuitive types. And the best way that I can describe how these 4 intuitive types work, it's like driving a car, right? You turn the car, you hear the engine. You don't need to be a mechanic to drive the car. But if you pop open the hood, there's all these components that work to get the engine, get into run to move the car. And so the best way to showcase these 4 intuitive types is through a case study of a non-believer. So one of my very, very first podcast interviewees was a fellow by the name of John Rothschild. This guy was an investment banker where data and process ruled his life. So when I came to him with intuition, he was saying, okay, come on, Sunil, that stuff, you talk about manifestation, voices from God, fluff, woo-woo stuff. Sunil, that stuff does not exist. Like, what are you talking about? You know what? I'll give you an interview. You're my friend. Come down, bring your camera, whatever. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I haven't seen you for a while. So let's have coffee. So I start the camera and I start telling him about, there's a CEO that actually sees omens on his right shoulder. And he's run 2 multi-million-dollar businesses. And he says, Sunil, I really wish I could shake this guy's hand. But you know what? Any business decision you make comes with experience and learning. And so now we're going to get into the 4 types of intuition. The first type is called experiential intuition. And what that does is that you're born with intuition, and there's a research study that shows that infants as young as 2 months old have been shown to have intuitive tendencies. What happens is when you're younger, 5,000 to 6,000 experiences per day. And when you're older, 28,000 to 35,000 experiences per day. Every single piece of that learning and experience, both good and bad, formal and informal, go into the subconscious area of your brain. So if you look at your brain like an iceberg, 90% is subconscious underwater and 10%, which is the conscious, which is above water. So every day you've got millions of data points going into the subconscious area of your brain. So, and over time, once you're about to make a decision, your experiential intuition is going to go into this library with billions of data points in it to say, okay, somewhere in the past, you've either made this decision and it worked out for you, similar in nature or exact, or it didn't. And this is what fuels these signals. And so in some cases, I was telling John that your intuition has you go against the data. And he's going, that's really funny, Sunil, that you mentioned that, because I have an example for you. And he said, okay. I said, well, tell me. So John was in the business of putting franchise locations in, like Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, those kind of things. And his team would use a benchmarking system out of 10. And so a 9 out of 10, when they looked at traffic patterns, development in the area, and demographics, for example, a 9 out of 10 said, yes, put a McDonald's or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever that franchise was. There was a particular area in Toronto, which is just a crap area of Toronto. His team says it's a 5.5 out of 10. And he walks into this area, and now we're getting into the second of the two called situational intuition. We've all had this where we walk into a situation, we go, something's wrong, or I feel good about the situation. And you may not vocalize it, but John did this where he walked into this area of Toronto and he looks around and he says, now he's using the words, perhaps it's my intuition. He says, I think we should put a franchise here. And so he goes against his team's 5.5 out of 10 rating and puts in the franchise called the Beer Market, which ended up being the most profitable brand under his whole portfolio. Wow. And then something changes in John's life where his purpose changes. And so now we're going to get into the third of the four called relational intuition. What relational intuition does is it filters people through to only allow those who truly care for your success. Now, these aren't yes people. These are people who will give you constructive criticism, but you know that anytime you need them, they are there for you. And so in John's case, when his purpose changed and he wanted to actually run a business, this guy was making $3 to $4 million a year as an investment banker. So everyone who said like $3 to $4 million a year, high-end restaurants, private jets, limousines, security, that's what you're trading off. Are you nuts? And there's only one person that actually asked him why. And that was his wife. And his wife said, John, why are you doing this? I know this is what you want to do. I'll support you, but you have to tell me why you're doing this. And so John now is now, I'm paraphrasing, an hour into our interview when John first started saying intuition does not exist, to now him actually saying, Sunil, you can have all the data in the world, but sometimes you have to trust your intuition. And what I told my wife is that this just feels right. That was his positive intuitive signal. And so the fourth of the four is called creative intuition. That's the actual decision that you make. And in John's case, you would think creative intuition with his background would say, okay, here's a safe business to run, healthy revenues, good cash flows, balance sheet looks strong. Nope. Not John's intuition. John's intuition says, no, you know what? You're going to run this tiny bankrupt little restaurant. And so John trusts his intuition, walks into that tiny bankrupt little restaurant to start it up. And that tiny bankrupt little restaurant ended up being Eastside Mario's location number 1. And over the next 20 years, he grew that to over $2 billion in revenues over a number of brand names before he retired, all because it felt right. That's the power of intuition. That's how you use the 4 types of intuition in business, including the signals. And so going back to the original question of what entrepreneurs do wrong, they first need to understand how intuition works. They need to understand that they need to optimize the 4 types of intuition because we're naturally stronger in one of the 4. And I take executives and entrepreneurs, they actually have a quiz to see which one they're strongest in. And then what I do with my team is I optimize the other 3 because they all have to work together. And then the second problem is they have no clue what their intuitive signals are because nobody's ever asked them to do that. It's not as if you go to a Starbucks and say, oh, wow, some people say, how's the weather? I'm like, hey, what are your intuitive signals like today? It's like, oh, this guy's on something. It's not something you would say like, this Indian guy, I got to move away from him. But that's what's not done. Yet after interviewing now over 1,300 people for my podcast series and for the work that I do, I've got a huge collection of incredibly unique intuitive signals, like the Omen or another entrepreneur who every time he got into a business for the wrong reasons, his left earlobe would pulsate with heat. And he never knew this until we started the interview. And he says, nobody's ever asked me that question. And as he's talking about the failures he had, he keeps grabbing his earlobe. And then about 8 minutes into the interview, it just hits him. Oh my God, Sunil, I just figured out what my intuitive signal is. My very first bad intuitive signal is my earlobe. And so any decision that he makes that is not the right one, if he senses heat in his earlobe, he walks away. He backs away from that decision. And then now he's written a couple of books. He's gotten into a number of entrepreneurial, like he's just very, very successful, but he's paying attention to his intuitive signal. And so that's where entrepreneurs start going wrong, is because they haven't optimized their intuition. And so when they haven't done that, then who knows what decisions they're making, because maybe they're using it based on their past experience that's very logical or rational in nature, and that's been done for a number of years, but that's not necessarily what's the right one for this particular incident or this particular business situation. And so that's what I train people to do, is just first optimize their intuition. And then once they're optimized, they understand how it works for others. And now they understand that trusted relationship, because their intuition, they understand the intuition of others. And intuition is a two-way street. So when they talk about showing empathy and being genuine, you better do that, because if you don't do that in a genuine way, the intuition of others is going to get triggered, remember, in under 14 seconds, to say, I don't trust that person. I don't want to work for that person again. And so now you're just a number. And so your employees are going to treat you like a number, and they're going to go to a company where they feel valued. Customers are buying with their values now. So if this company does not represent the values that resonate with me, then they're going to take their hard-earned money somewhere else. And then you've lost the game, because employees, the top talent, don't want to work for you, and the customers don't want to buy from you. So what's left? You've got a business that's about to plummet someplace. But if you do things the right way, then you attract the top talent, and you attract the loyal customers who are not only buying more, they're telling others, as I was saying at the top of this podcast, at this interview, and they're coming from your competitors. And you squeeze your competitors, and they're finished. It's just a matter of time. And then you become the brand of choice in the marketplace because of this thing called intuition, and that intuitive relationship that you have, this trusted relationship within the four walls of your business or online. And this has to be consistent with your marketing messaging. This has to be consistent with your hiring practices. This has to be consistent in the customer journey through your sales. And it has to be consistent with how you lead your employees. And those are the four buckets that I train businesses in. And when they do, boy, oh boy, business is amazing.
Yes. Oh, and it's funny, because if I think of like the best decisions that I've taken, my pattern has always, and it took me time to reflect on it a little while ago, is I feel that I'm dying inside. Like there's something just slowly dying inside. But the people around me are like, but hey, it's good. You have a good job. You have a nice house. You have this. But I'm like, no, I'm like dying. So when there's that duality of me feeling that I'm dying inside, and people are saying, hey, why don't you settle for the status quo? Now I know that means it's like, all right, that means it's a right decision for me.
Exactly. And there are other people who, and there's two types of people I find, is that there's those who are well-meaning, who just want you to be safe.
Yes.
Then there's
the people that love us and that we love.
Yes, but rarely do people actually take, even if they want to give that advice, if they ask you, why are you thinking like that? Not too many people will, and put them through the lens of where they really are trying to understand you. What they're trying to do is go through their own lens and then give you advice. But that doesn't work. Intuition is very individual to each and every person. And so when you have that trusted circle around you, then those are the people that will kind of understand, okay, what do you want? And then the second type of people I find are the ones who, really don't care about you. They just care about listening to themselves, and they're going to give you that opinion, and then you kind of look at, okay, thanks for that opinion, but there's no invested interest in what you want. It's just listening to themselves. And so when you actually implement that sort of that trust and you start doing things your own way, then and you implement trust in the environment, then things happen. And one of the case studies I'll share with you and your listeners and those watching is that there was a company that was struggling, $400,000 company in the healthcare area. And I had been known as a turnaround expert at that time. I had a couple of big turnarounds that I was involved with. And so they asked me to come and help them. And so with the two co-CEOs, one of the first things I say is you have to let me make the decisions. You have to back off and you have to allow me to make those decisions without questioning them. And so they definitely agreed to that. And then, so again, struggling $400,000 company, the first thing I do was I increase all the salaries. And the reason why I did this is because they were underpaying the employees. And it was very, very clear that there was no trust between management and the employees. You can tell by the body language, the way they ask the questions, the type of questions they ask. So the very, very first thing I needed to do was earn their trust. And the first thing was to make sure that they felt appreciated. And all I did was just get them to a salary that's respectable. And the next thing I did is that, okay, how do we fix this company? But it wasn't my idea; it was their ideas. And I said, where do you see the problems? And then as they came up with ideas, I started implementing them. And what happened is that they started to say, okay, first of all, who's this Sunil guy? I think we're going to get fired. Was the first sentiment. Every time I come in, for some reason, people they start thinking they're going to be let go, but that's not the case at all. Oftentimes, we actually hire more people because we need the right talent, and there are some caustic people that have to go for sure. But those are some of the rare cases I have to deal with. So in this case, not only have I got them respectable get them to earn what they should be earning in the market. Now I'm listening to them and I'm asking for their solutions. And then we start to implement the solutions with their help, ask them to provide their input, policies, and procedures. And then pretty soon, I was able to concentrate on expansion and they were able to backfill with the policies and procedures and the operational stuff because they trusted me. And so they went from struggling $400,000 to, in the year, about 2.5 years later, $3.5 million. And I was able to leave them with a $10 million run rate for the following year. And to give you a sense of what happened with the competitors, this was in the healthcare space where the average healthcare facility for this particular type was around the $250,000 to $400,000 a year mark, top line revenue. We were billing about $1 million, and we were expanding for each one. And next thing you know, 3 or 4 competitors were folding around us because their employees were coming over because we were an amazing place to work. And the customers who were our patients were coming in for things like massage and physiotherapy. And they were coming in clumps because they enjoyed the camaraderie so much. And we had one person who was a member of the local police force. And within 8 months, we had the whole city's police force coming with a contract with our company. To deal with their private insurance. And so that's this type of wins that we had, all because we had a trusted, fun environment that there was so much trust between management and employees. And the competitors just fell by the wayside. And we were really one of 2 left. By the time I left, we had 4 or 5 of these health places folded. There was one left that was struggling and phoning for us to buy the assets of that company, because they simply just couldn't function. So that's eliminating competition right away. And I've done this a number of times for a number of companies. I have a lot of NDAs signed because they don't want their competitors to know. So I have case studies, which I can't mention the company names because they don't want their competitors to know that I've helped them basically, be the brand of choice in the marketplace.
And I love it because when we talk about growing our businesses and, being the choice in our field, we often think about, we need to do more. But this is not about doing more. This is about being more.
Yes, absolutely.
If I'm an entrepreneur watching this and listening to you today, how do I connect or reconnect with my intuition? Because we were talking just before I started to record that people are, often we just wait for like the big signals, like the sky to come apart, the light to come down, the sun, like, this is what you're doing, but it's not always the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And the very, very first thing that I get entrepreneurs to do if they want to even do a social self-study is start a piece of paper. And on one side, take a side and take a look at, okay, what are the good business decisions I made, or even the ones in your personal life, because your intuition doesn't care about personal and professional life. It's an amygdala. It says you're making a decision. Here's my signal for that decision. It's your experiential intuition that will look at whether it's business or personal. But from a signals perspective, what you want to do is make sure you get your personal and professional life, because you could be sharing a signal between your business and your personal life. But regardless, you on one side, you put your good decisions and how did it feel like in that moment. And so that's very, very important to really get down to those feelings and keep going, because you're going to get a basket or inventory of positive signals. And they could be, 4 or 5, could be 2. That's up to you. And so on another piece of paper, or on another side, you do the same thing with your negative decisions. But what you have to be careful with the bad decisions you made is that you have to make sure that is that the first bad decision or the third bad decision. Because what happens with negative intuitive signals is they actually start out with like a whisper, as that Oprah calls it, and they get louder and louder until you can no longer hear them anymore. And so, for example, there's a CEO of a 9-figure company, top of the world, Glassdoor, huge Glassdoor rating. Everything was going well for him. But for some reason, his intuition started rumbling, you need to quit. And he ignored it. Then he was in the back of an Uber, and all of a sudden his intuition just blurted the words, I quit. And so he says, oh my God, okay. And so he goes to his board and he quits. And then soon after that, 6 months later, the company implodes because the market crashed. So timing for his intuition was really, really amazing. But what you need to do is make sure you figure out what that first signal is, because if you make the mistake of thinking it's signal number 3, like you wait for that gut feeling and it's signal number 3, by the time you get that gut feeling again, you've missed signal number 1 and signal number 2. And so that means that you made 2 bad decisions. So those 2 bad decisions could be that you stub your toe on a door, or you've hired the wrong person. And in one case, I've got Rick Spencer, who had a 39-year-old company, ignored his intuition. The signals were there, getting louder and louder. And eventually they got so loud that he fired the employee. But by that time, the employee cooked the books. And so this 39-year-old company that had at once made 20 million in revenues in the steel industry and was making $2 million in revenues by the time this employee was fired, the auditors found out that the books were cooked. And the company was gone in 3 weeks, bankrupt in 3 weeks, because it ignored his intuitive signals. So this is why it's so important on the negative signals to map these out. Once you have these inventory of signals, then any decision you make in your personal and professional life is going to be accompanied with a signal. And if it becomes a bad decision, failures are amazing, because what I say is what that means is that what you've done is you've not recognized the signal. So you've been through a bad decision, fine, deal with it. But what was the signal that told you not to make that decision? Add it to your inventory so that you never make that decision again. And once you have that inventory of signals, now you're golden. And the next step is to really kind of optimize the 4 types of intuition. So you go to my book, or you just listen to the 4 types here, put them across and say, here's my decision. What does experiential intuition tell me about my past experience about this decision? Who are the people involved? What's the business situation, the business units that have to coalesce together to bring this business decision to fruition? And then the creative intuition is, what's the decision? And so you look at past and future for each one. So what's in the past that didn't work, in the future, what's going to work? And then now you've got an optimized intuitive decision to move forward. And it could be as small as, where you're buying a new supplier from, to as big as, what's the new market that I want to get into to expand my products and services into. So it works for small to, it doesn't matter what size, but the process is exactly the same.
I love it. So I'm actually in the midst of reading your book where you talk about the 4 types of intuition. And
awesome.
Examples in there really where we can relate, and I was like, oh yeah, yep. I did turn left when I thought I should be turning right. And yeah, that shit backfired in my face. But now you know. So I love the exercise that you give. Tell me, other than buying the book, which I will put the link in the comments of the video for sure. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to sunilgodse.com, everything's there. My podcast is there. My books are there. You've got me talking about the free stuff that you can always reach out to me on any of the socials. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. I don't do dancing on TikTok because if I dance, the intuition of others is going to say, let's not see this guy again. Although my daughter is saying, Dad, do a bit of a dance. It's, no, I want people to actually be attracted to what I have to say about intuition in business. And you know, Instagram, Facebook, and shoot me a DM, send me an email at sunilgodse.com. Happy to answer any questions.
Nice. Thank you. And we happen to live not so far from I'm in Montreal, Quebec.
Yes.
You're also
I'm in London, Ontario. Yeah. So not too far at all.
So we actually had to go halfway around the world to be able to meet each other. We're actually close, which is a whole new topic in itself. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I hope people will actually take the time to, yes, read the book, listen to the podcast. You have outstanding guests and interviews in there, but also do the exercise because we all have intuition, but we live in a time where we actually live in our heads. So coming back to it, that's where we make the best decisions. And I don't know if you agree, that's also when we have more fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go back to that intuition.
Absolutely. And it's never wrong. It's never wrong. That's the one thing I keep getting is intuition ever wrong? And I said no.
Thank you so much for spending all that time and giving us that exercise to be.
No problem. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
I hope you like this interview. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And you know what? Reach out to Sunil on social media. You'll see he gives a lot of information. Follow his podcast. It's really, really spectacular. Like I said in the interview, I'm in the midst of reading his book, Gut. And by talking with him, it made me realize so many times where I took decisions, some that I knew was the wrong decision. And I knew it ahead of time. Come on, we know it, right? We've all done it. And some great decisions that I know. So once we know our pattern, once we tap into the power of intuition, really, that is where we see that so much more is possible. Thank you for being here week after week, and I will see you next Tuesday.